Good evening. This is Thursday, February the 27th, 2020. This is the North Andover Board of Health meeting. Call to order. And the first order of business is a Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of minutes.
The minutes were critiqued, and I make a motion to accept.
I second that motion.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion's been approved. There'll be a public hearing next month on camp regulations. And I'm going to skip around a little bit right now. At the end of the meeting, we'll be talking about the coronavirus, what little we know about it, and what the state and the town are going to do about it. So I'll start off that conversation, and then I'll turn it over at that time to Brian. I'd like to go right now, skip around a little bit, to communications, announcements, and discussions. Mr. David Rand is here, and he wants to discuss wetlands, damage, and beaver activity where he lives. So come to the podium, please.
Good evening. Thank you. Trouble is, you're spending a few minutes with you tonight. In 1960, I took my wife out to Dale Street and showed her a piece of property. And I said, "How would you like to live here?" And she said, "I'm not sure. It's pretty far out in the country." There was a sale sign on a piece of property, and I had worked for the Kittredge family, who owned all the property across the street. I started working for them when I was 10 years old. And so my wife and I purchased that piece of property. We bought 5 acres of land for $2,400. And since 1960, I have been keeping records of my property. I built a house. I raised a family. I have 3 children. I have 4 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. And over the years, I've been very concerned about that area of the town, and especially of my property. And last year, I called the Board of Health and I asked them if there was spraying going on, because there's a large playground down the street from my house, and it's a wonderful, wonderful place. But from the minute that it warms up till the minute that it freezes over, all summer long, it's filled with little children and families. And I was very concerned about the spread of Eastern encephalitis and the other mosquito-borne illnesses that I'm sure you're well aware of. And so I was told that, yes, we do spray the playgrounds. But in the back of my house is a huge body of water, stagnant water at this point. And I want to take it back to the 1930s, when it was a depression. And in the rear of my property, there were ditches dug. And when I bought the property, my dad said to me, "Did you find the ditches?" And I said, "No, I didn't." And so after I bought the property and I built a house, I went looking for the ditches, and I found them. They were put there by the WPA in the Roosevelt administration to give people work and to lead the water from what is now the watershed of Lake Echicquac into Lake Echicquac. The ditches are about 4 or 5 feet deep. They were dug over a period of years, and this is what they look like now. That's what they originally looked like. The ditches were there and working, functioning properly for a long period of time. And then in around 1978, 1979, I went in to the rear of my property and I found that I had built a barn on my property and I had riding horses for some time while my children were growing. And I found that my property was becoming increasingly wet. And so I went into the rear of the property and I found that the ditches were being plugged up by beaver dams. And so I called the Board of Health and I asked them to come up and look at my property. And Sandra Starr from the Board of Health came up and I said, I'm picking up an odor of sewage in my backyard, and that's concerning to me, where I have a family. And so she went back and she wrote a report, and I have a copy of that report. And subsequent to that, I called a friend of mine who was in charge of the pumping station and the water purification plant. And I asked her if she would come up and if she would do some coliform tests on my property to see if my septic system was failing. And so she did. She came into the back of my property and she performed coliform tests. And what she found was very disturbing. She found that my septic system had completely failed. And so I immediately contacted the gentleman who had been maintaining my septic tank for me. And I realized that I was going to have to use that as a holding tank and not use my leach field anymore because it was contaminated. And I had always had a vegetable garden. I have a vegetable garden now. I've had to move it from place to place because of the flooding. But when I detected this serious situation with my septic tank, and then the coliform test come back and proved that there was a substantial amount of contamination in my backyard. I went to the state of Massachusetts and a man named Eric Amati came out from the Division of Wildlife. And he looked over the situation and he said, yes, we have a serious problem here, Mr. Mann. And he said, what would you like to do about it? And I said, what I would like to do, I would like to get permits from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to remove those beaver dams because, as you know, if you remove a beaver dam, that's draining a wetland and it carries a substantial fine. And so he went back and talked to the director of wildlife and they issued me permits starting in 1979. And I had the permit to take out all of the beaver dams in the back of the house to try to keep the septic system, not only mine, but the whole area functioning properly. And I would go out 3 or 4 times a week and take out those beaver dams. And naturally, as I took them out, the beavers would put them back. At one point, some of the neighbors decided that they wanted to call in the trapper, and a man named John Benedetto, who has been employed by the town of North Andover on many occasions. He's a trapper. He teaches the course, or he did for some time. He taught the course on trapping. And Johnny came out and he gave me a crash course on beavers. And I continued on this path until the Bear Hill subdivision came in. I attended every conservation meeting, every planning board meeting, and every Board of Health meeting dealing with the Bear Hill subdivision. And at one point, one of the engineers was a friend that I had known for years, and he said, "We'll never hurt you, Dave. We will never do anything to hurt you." I said, "Joe, if you can get water to run uphill, you won't hurt me. But as long as water runs downhill, you're going to hurt me." And shortly after the first foundation was put in on Bear Hill, I started to get water, large amounts of water on my property and in my property, in my cellar and in my barn. And at that point, I went to the conservation and I tried to get them to set aside certain parcels of land on Bear Hill that I thought were wetlands and that I thought should not be developed. I was unsuccessful with that. Those parcels of land were developed. So I hired an engineer, a civil engineer, to come in and do a study on my property. I have that study, and what we determined was, yes, the water is running downhill, and we have an obstruction in the wooded area behind the property, and we have these failed septic systems. And so I went before the Board of Health, and I went before the Conservation Commission, and in an effort to try to reduce the amount of water in the rear of our properties. When I bought my property, I could walk from my house to Great Pond Road, which is on the other side, way down along the edge of Lake Achicka, without ever getting my feet wet. That now is a huge body of water. And when I was working on these beaver dams, I came up to a point that's all on town property now, and this is very important because over the course of many years, people that have problems with beavers aren't able to deal with them because the dam is on private property, and yet it's affecting their property. And the people that own the property where the dam is don't want the dam to be touched. But in this case, the dams that we're looking at are on town property. It was originally the Leland property, and over the years, the town of North Andover has acquired all of that property that's undeveloped. And this property that is affected by this one beaver dam goes from the Glenny property, which is next to the Schmoller property, all the way down to Castlemere. That entire area is controlled by one dam. And as I worked through the woods, when I was working on these beaver dams, I ran into this huge piece of ledge. It's probably 5 or 6 feet high, and it's monstrous. When the WPA were putting in these ditches and they found that, they blasted a trench right through it. And I knew that if the beavers found that piece of ledge and dammed it up, they would control everything behind it, behind the playgrounds, behind our houses, by that one dam.
Excuse me, before the meeting, I met with Brian, he's the director of Department of Health. I knew you'd be on the agenda, and I asked, what are you looking for? And he said, well, he will tell us more when he arrives. And by the way, I too live in Dale Street.
I know.
Yeah, and there's a bigger problem where I live. And I also have a septic system, as you do. You said that your septic field is contaminated. Is that because the high water level due to the beavers?
No, well, the minute the sewer came down the street, I immediately went into the sewer. So I lost my ability
Oh,
to
okay.
control those dams.
Okay. But what are you looking for
What I'm
right
trying to
now?
do-
Because this may be
what I'm
something that
trying
we're not in a position to get to the bottom of at this time. Perhaps you can sit down with Brian and his department, certainly before the next meeting. We have prints in the area, and I would hope that by the next meeting we'd have closure. But I'm sorry that I interjected, but basically, what would you like right now? What can we do for you?
What I would like you to do, I would like you to allow Brian, I would like you to get together with Brian. And what I had attempted to do for some time is reduce the amount of water, the standing water, that could be still well contaminated, even though we do have a portion of sewage out there. And reduce the amount of water down to where it was when these ditches were dug. And that property will immediately foliate and will immediately get rid of a lot of the area that's breeding the harmful bacteria and especially the mosquitoes. And it's not difficult to do, it takes time. But the trouble is, if you took that one beaver dam out right away, you would cause destruction down in the North Andover Country Club that would be unbelievable, because there's such a tremendous amount of water back there. And that's basically what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to reduce this amount of water. I've talked to the DPW about it. I've talked to conservation officer about it, and the conservation officer and I, not the present conservation officer, but the young lady who left a few months back, and we were in discussions about how much water we wanted to reduce in that area. And my quest is to try to reduce it back to where it was originally, and that way the area in back of these properties would be foliated again, and there would be less contamination in that water. Running water is always much cleaner than stagnant water, and I don't have to tell that to you, you know that.
This may be an issue above and beyond our capabilities, but I don't see there being a problem unless you feel otherwise, us meeting with him,
I would say
talking with him.
problem. I don't know if we have the appropriate reasons to start taking out these beaver dams at this point.
Mhm.
I do have maps, and I do have pictures. I can show you guys, kind of explain where everything is and what it looks like. If you guys want to look at that stuff. Yeah?
No. What?
Yes.
The reason I came before the Board of Health is because there is a health factor involved. A serious health factor, in my opinion. There is a health factor involved with all this stagnant water in this area. And I realize, and believe me, because I've been dealing with this now since 1960, since I bought my property. And the town rebuilt Dale Street, and they put a culvert onto my property and put water onto my property. So it's not something that I haven't been well aware of for years.
This is for you guys to
And-
look at, so. Just to give you an idea as to where everything is, this is Dave's property right here.
This is it. And this whole piece of property here, from here to here, is controlled by one dam back in here. And that one dam, if I could get permission from the town of North Andover, from the Board of Health and the Conservation Commission, to go in and gradually release that dam so that it would flow to Lake Achicot. This whole area in here would refoliate. Now,
Over here, so the dam is.
It's around here somewhere.
Is it over here?
right,
I actually have it on a different map too.
yeah, here's where the dam is, right here.
Okay,
Here's-
yeah,
this
there
is
it
the-
is.
This is the golf course.
Yep.
And I went to the golf course 2 or 3 years ago and explained to them what was happening and said, you should go in and talk to conservation and town and see if you can't give, because if I went in there tomorrow, I have a little John Deere tractor. I'm 88 years old, I've had a stroke, so I had to buy a tractor to help me do my work. So I could go in there and buy a tractor and I could tear that dam out very rapidly, but if I did that.
Well, that's not gonna happen.
This whole, this whole area would flood
So-
Yeah, yeah.
completely.
So what you're looking at, and I gave you guys pictures as well, so this is, the first set of pictures, I think, is this big wetland area here. The other one is over here, and they basically drain out to this point here. So there's a house here with a driveway and a culvert. There's a beaver deceiver or a flow device
That-
in here. This picture with the cage,
Oh,
coming
yeah,
into the
okay.
stone wall, that stone wall is right here. The water flows this way, and this water flows this way. It all comes up to here, which I took pictures of.
Where's the access point for that
The
house?
town of North Andover, the
Right
town
here,
of
the
North
driveway.
Andover,
Driveway right here.
the town of North
Ah,
Andover
there it
has
is.
a right of way
Okay.
on this driveway,
Do
all the
we?
way up.
You sure about that?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. The town of North Andover has a 10-foot strip behind my stone wall and that connects this piece to this piece. And we have a right of way up this driveway, right to the bridge.
Okay, so what I had to do was basically figure out where this dam was. You can't see it on an aerial. So we went through all the highlighted in pink. That's town property. The first thing we wanted to do was figure out where the dam was and who owns the property, because if somebody owns a piece of property that has a beaver dam on it, they're the ones responsible for either putting in a flow device or trapping or alleviating any type of nuisance per the actual state laws. So you have the authority under the beaver laws to mandate people remove any type of threat. If there's an imminent threat of roadway flooding, septic systems flooding, houses flooding, public utilities flooding, things like that, the Board of Health is in charge of issuing enforcement orders to get these things taken care of. So those are the properties there. I think this is an aerial. This is the house with the driveway, I believe.
This was Adam Oaks' house.
Yes.
Adam Oaks was a hockey player for the Boston Bruins.
Yep.
And when they allowed Adam
Yeah.
Oaks to build his house here, that's when they took the easement on the driveway leading up to it.
This is all wetlands. All these,
Everybody.
all wetlands.
So
So-
where's dam in retrospect? So it's probably somewhere.
I believe it is, yeah, somewhere down there. But I just want to give you an area of how big these wetlands are. Take these away. So this, I went out with Curtis, and if you guys look at the pictures, you see Curtis with a rod with some things on top of it. That's a GPS locator. So we basically went out and we started to find out where everything was. We hiked out, parked here, hiked through here, found the dam over here. This is us mapping the edge of this wetland here and here to this channel. There's a picture of the channel in your packet that shows where the actual dam is.
And that's town land.
This is all, yeah, I highlighted it before, this is all town property.
Yeah.
So this,
Yeah. Yeah.
this over here. So, if you look at it, there's definitely a dam here, it definitely backs up all this. What I haven't found yet, and I haven't walked the entire wetland yet, we just did this area first to find out what the situation was with this dam. One of the old ditches that Dave was talking about is right there.
See, this originally, for many years, this property is all filled with stone walls. Those stone walls all delineated property, and they were built for the farmers.
Yes.
And then, that's when the thirties, when the WPA came in and dug these trenches to lead the water to Lake of Chicot.
So this right here, sorry to interrupt, was a proposed roadway back in 1985 that never got built. Because they were gonna do a 34 lot subdivision. But it never went through, I don't know why, I haven't looked up the records, but I'm assuming it had to do with wetlands, things like that. But they actually marked out where all the ditches were. And this is one of those ditches right here, coming right down through this area. This is the survey that me and Curtis did with his GPS equipment. So this is one of those ditches that basically drains these areas this way.
Back in 1951 and 1952, this area was on fire. And the fire department came out to this area, and this was Leland property at the time. And they started to put out the grass fire. And all of a sudden, the truck started sinking into the ground. And a friend of mine was driving the truck at the time, and he backed it up, and he called the fire chief, and he said, what's going on? And they discovered what they had was a peat bog fire. Now, I don't know whether you're familiar with the town in Pennsylvania that has coal mines burning underneath it, and they've had to evacuate the whole town. And this is what happened on a smaller scale here. The peat bog caught on fire. There was no way to extinguish that fire. The only way to extinguish it was wait till it flooded, and then it put out. So when you look at this area, you see old tree stumps and things sticking up, and you think there's probably 4 or 5 feet of water there. In reality, there's a peat bog there, and it'll never be built on.
Well, let's talk about going forward. Brian, what is your recommendation in that you have spent time on this already and this is new
Yeah.
to us?
Yes, so what I've seen so far, I haven't seen any type of imminent threat. I've walked around certain areas of it, there is definitely flooding. Access to here is really tough. You do have to go on private property to get to it.
Well, I can take you, which property are you talking about?
The Adamos property,
Huh?
the Adamos property, the house on Carriage Chase.
Oh, well, we have a right of way up that driveway. We have a right of way right to the bridge.
So this right here. So this is the driveway, here's that bridge that we have pictures of.
This looks like it's all private
Correct.
property.
I don't know if we have an easement on that.
This is the bridge. This is the bridge, and we have a right of way from Carriage Chase all the way up to this bridge that was taken when Adam Oates was allowed to build a house in the back here. And that allows us to go right up to this, to this wetland. And like I told Brian before, there's an old logging trail back there that we used to ride our horses on.
Well, let's focus going forward.
Yeah.
What we are going to do. Do you have to involve the conservation
Of course,
department?
if we did anything, we would involve conservation. This was
The
just-
state and so forth? What do you see the next step from here, Brian?
We have to determine if there's an actual imminent threat to any type of infrastructure or people's houses, things like that.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
it's town property, so the DPW would be responsible for maintaining anything. Typically, they don't maintain and work on beaver dams unless there's an issue. They don't have the staff and resources to just kind of randomly monitor and enforce anything like that. So, we have to find the threat, we have to link it to this dam and this wetland system. As of right now, I haven't located anything yet. This area's all been sewered because it's in the watershed, so it alleviates that type of problem and that type of a threat. So there's no septic system being flooded out, and there's not issues with.
Okay, well, that's going to take a little time, and of
Yeah.
course, we will keep you apprised of what is
Yeah.
happening here. But,
So I guess it's, if the board determines that wetlands themselves and of this size in Tripoli is a threat that we want to take care of, we can discuss that, you guys can talk about it, you can vote on it. But for roadways, for houses, for septic systems, there's nothing that I've noticed yet, but I haven't walked the entire site yet. me and Curtis are gonna go and probably map the existing wetland.
The reason I came before you now is because this is the perfect time of year to observe this. The area itself, the area can be walked on. There's no mosquitoes, and there are none of that present to have to cover yourself from.
Yep.
And so this is why I came at this point in time to talk to you about this in hopes that I could open a dialogue with you. And I understand, believe me, because I've been working on this since 1960, so I am very well aware of all the ramifications that go with this. I was a police officer in this town for 30 years, and after I retired from that, I worked with my son, who is a building contractor. And so I'm familiar with the regulations, the rules and regulations.
Okay, and what I'm asking is that you give us time, we have to determine if there's an imminent threat, and we will be in touch with you with what we're doing going forward.
That's fine, that's
Okay.
fine, that's wonderful.
Good.
That's the biggest step that
Good.
I've had for a long time.
Good.
Has there
Good.
ever been positive testing of West Nile or Triple E in any of these?
Not in that area. Our traps are located in a different section of Osgood Street. Historically, there have been positives in town before, for West Nile and Tripoli, but that's been a few years out at this point.
And they're usually well-contained, that.
And then we do targeted
major issue.
spraying and things like that, yeah. I mean, it is a huge wetland area back there, so if anything was ever done, it's gonna be done in small increments, because that's acres and acres and acres of water being held back by a couple of beaver dams.
Anything else on this?
How long will it take you more or less, O'Brien, just to assess this whole situation?
If it's nice out over the next month, then I can definitely get out there and check out certain areas from certain access points and see what's going on, how high up the water levels are, where they go, where they affect. I've just done that one area so far, but
Good enough.
It
Thank you,
is,
David,
yeah.
and we will be in touch with you on this, and
Thank you very
we're
much.
no more than a
Thanks,
phone
Dave.
call
Thank
away.
you.
Yeah,
so I'll be in touch, or call my office later on this week or next week.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
I can meet you on your house and we can walk around that part of the
yeah.
wetland area.
Right, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you.
thanks,
Good
Dave.
night,
Thank you.
I want to digress a little bit from the normal meetings that we have. I want to talk a little bit first about the Board of Health. I've been a member of the town Board of Health for over 13 years, been to over 150 of these meetings, and it's not much is said, if anything, about the Board of Health. Basically, look, our town Board of Health, we're volunteers. There are 5 of us. We're appointed by the town manager in cooperation with the town selectmen. I also want to talk a little bit about our chairman. Certainly in the last 13 years, since I've been a member, the chairman, Dr. Frank McMillan, he's unable to be here tonight. So as a board, or as the board clerk, I knew that I'll be filling in for him, and I've been reflecting upon board chairman. There have been 3 chairmen since I've been here, Dr. Tom Tolbridge, Larry Fixler, and Dr. Frank McMillan, all of whom are intelligent, all of whom are humble, and all of whom are hard workers. They're just ordinary residents who have done, from my perspective, an extraordinary job. Kudos to all of them. The coronavirus. I want to start the conversation, and as I said, Brian will end it, talking about what our government is doing to address this virus. And first, I want to read from an article. This is the front page of yesterday's Wall Street Journal. I want to read one paragraph, and it says, the federal health authorities say they now expect a wider spread of the coronavirus in the U.S. and are preparing for a potential pandemic, although they remain unsure about how severe the health threat could be. Nancy Mazzoni, director of the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, said Tuesday the agency expects a sustained transmission of the virus, and call for businesses, schools, and communities to brace themselves and plan for potential outbreaks. She went on further to say that the question isn't if the virus will expand in the U.S., but when. I heard in the news that Johns Hopkins University says that the United States is better prepared than any other country to address this virus. The virus has already affected our stock market. It's down 1,200 points today, and don't see a bottom. It's also due to politics, but I don't want to talk about that. It's primarily due to the coronavirus. In China right now, there are over 700 million Chinese that have been restricted. That is, the movement has been restricted. So I went online today to the CDC website, and what I did is I culled some information for this meeting in the form starting as questions. First, what is it? What is this coronavirus? Well, it's referred to as COVID-19, that is a coronavirus disease in 2019. It's a member of the coronavirus family that has never been encountered. Like other coronaviruses, such as MERS, which is Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, and SARS, which is severe acute respiratory syndrome, it comes from animals. And by the way, I don't like reading, I'd rather ad-lib, but I want to get it right. And of course, I question how right the information is that we have out there. So please bear with me here. The virus can cause pneumonia, and as such, antibiotics are of no use. Furthermore, antiviral drugs we have against flu will not work. There's no vaccine as of today. Hopefully, there'll be a vaccine in the not-too-distant future. Now, as I said, I culled this from the CDC and in other sources. So if I'm off the mark, please let me know. Okay, what's the genesis of the virus? Well, we don't know. What we do know, we know a lot about SARS. That goes back to 2012. Basically, it's from bats to civet cats in China. These are wild animals. They do look like cats and are a delicacy in China. And disease is transmitted to humans. So these cats, they're in the open markets. The open markets in China, from my perspective, and I've worked in Asia for several years. I travel throughout Asia. The open markets and food markets in China are like killing fields. Give you an example of how large the open food markets are. Wild animals, about $94 billion in U.S. currency a year. Of course, they also eat, in China, they also eat farm animals, unlike people in much of the world. They also eat dogs and cats, unlike people in much of the world. Last year, about 10 million dogs and 4 million cats were slaughtered for consumption in China. I'm saying it as it is. It appears that the first report of the coronavirus was from Wuhan, China, on December the 31st of 2019, from a marketplace. Another possibility is that the virus could have leaked from a biomedical lab near the marketplace, a fraction of a mile away from the epicenter. And it's the only lab in China equipped to handle a coronavirus. Coincidental? Don't know. A lot of things we don't know. Regardless, people have been infected in about 40 countries, and there's been about 100,000 known cases, 60 of which in the United States, and about 3,000 deaths, none, fortunately, so far in the United States. Now, last year, about 50,000 Americans died from pneumonia, and about 61,000 died from the flu. However, there was a fear of a coronavirus pandemic. The last major pandemic that we had, 1918, 1920, referred to as the Spanish flu, killed about 50 million people. There was a European pandemic, 1347 to 1351, that wiped out more than half the population of all Europe. They don't know how many people died, somewhere between 75 million and 200 million people gone because of this European pandemic. What are the symptoms? Fever, cough, shortness of breath. And the symptoms can occur from 2 days to 14 days after exposure. How does it spread? It spreads between people who are in close contact with one another, that is within 3 to 6 feet, via respiratory droplets produced when an infected person coughs or sneezes, possibly through touching a surface or object that has the virus on it, and then touching one's own mouth or nose and or eyes. As other coronaviruses, the spread probably is at its peak in the winter. But I read that a reason is that the winter's time that nasal passages can be irritated. In addition, during the winter time, people cluster together and stay inside. So people are in closer proximity to other people during that time of the year.
Same reason why flu season is in the winter.
Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, on this coronavirus, they're saying, well, we'll wait till the weather gets better, but the weather in the southern hemisphere is going to be cold when the weather is warm here. And we don't know. We just don't know that much about it at this particular time. When people are the sickest, that's when the spread happens. But the spread may be possible before even show symptoms, before people show their symptoms. Again, we don't know. So safety tips: wear mask. Speak with your doctor about the best mask. Now, you said N95 earlier, not the surgical mask?
So I don't think I think the general population does not need to wear a mask. It's more so for hospital employees or.
I'm talking about worst-case scenario now, too.
Yeah, I still think worst-case scenario, everybody should get their flu shot. That's probably the bigger public health message. I think N95s are probably an overkill. I think surgical masks are well within reason. That's what most hospitals are recommending now. But, and we're not quarantining patients yet for coronavirus, like negative pressure rooms or anything like that. It's just droplet precautions where they're either surgical masks or, because N95 masks are extremely expensive and they're now probably in extreme shortage too. So usually it's not the recommendation.
Oh, you can't buy any mask at all around here right now, unless they're just coming in. All the pharmacies, I've checked, gone. They're not there. I also read that the surgical mask, I've read that, yeah, it's okay, and yeah, it may not be okay for this virus, because it's a virus. So, don't know.
So the surgical masks are typically what's recommended for flu. So if I go into a patient's room who has the flu, I'm just wearing a surgical mask. I don't have to wear an N95.
Yeah, but the problem is
mask.
that there's just a lot about this virus that we just don't know right now. We just don't know. Hopefully you are right.
But also to the N95, you have to get it fitted, is that correct?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
That
that.
is correct. Yes.
Well, how expensive are they?
I worked in a
Yeah, I
hospital
don't know
before, I
yet.
don't know how expensive, but also too, you have to get fitted for it.
Yes.
It's not a one-size-fit-all.
Correct.
So-
You have to be specially fitted. Once a year, I have to get specially fitted for.
I think they're made by 3M, and 3M is not taking a hit in the stock market like other businesses, because they make products as such. Stay indoors and avoid contact with other people. Clean hands with soap and water and/or alcohol-based hand rub. I had read that with the SARS virus, they feel that it was cut back by up to 50% for just washing your hands on a very, very regular basis. Again, stop me anytime here. Cover nose and mouth when coughing or sneezing with tissue or flexed elbow. Thoroughly cooked meat and eggs. Avoid unprotected contact with live animals. One of the first signs of the virus in parts of the world, Asia in particular, was you go shopping and everything's gone. This is a run on food. Again, there's a lot that we don't know, but there's a lot that we do know, and my feeling is that it probably will get a little bit worse, and then it'll disappear because of the weather. So that's all that I have to say. Daphne, Patrick, you have anything further to say before we turn it over to Brian?
Coronavirus itself, certain strains of coronavirus are actually the common cold, or strains of the common cold. Rhinovirus is another one, adenovirus is another one. Why this coronavirus is different is because it's just a different strain of coronavirus. It's typically, if the people who have died are typically either elderly or immunocompromised. The average human being will have cold-like symptoms, but really nothing else. And I still have patients that come in and ask about the coronavirus. I just say it is more worrisome to get the flu than to actually get the coronavirus. This is not an imminent threat. I think that we have bigger diseases to worry about, like the flu that kills more people within the U.S. at this point. So I would just recommend just due diligence, normal hand hygiene, be aware of your surroundings, and live your life like you normally live your life.
You
My
dealing
2
with,
cents.
with this in your profession?
We are, because we see patients, we go into their homes, so there's a couple of folks that's been really hit, so business is kind of low, because we have Chinese population, so people are afraid. But we do say the hand washing is important, and also we remind them of a kid to sing the happy birthday song pretty much while you're washing your hands. So that's important to do so, the 20-second rule. And lots of hand sanitizer, but also to be mindful and thoughtful, and just be human. Just because all of this is going on, just be kind to your neighbor as it's happening. So that's what we have to remember in our line of business. So, yeah.
And as I said, they say maybe the nosedive in stock market is due 80% to the coronavirus and 20% to politics, and 80% the coronavirus. It's just fear. The people are just afraid because there's so much that we don't know right now. I don't recall anything like this in my life, but hopefully there'll be a vaccine soon. They're saying within a year there'll be a vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably similar to SARS. I'd say H1N1 was probably a huge scare, too. Those are probably the 2 most recent ones, I would say, would be on the same level.
Now, how many, there are, 33 people in Massachusetts on the watch list right now?
From coming back
Are
from.
they actually quarantined?
travels. I don't know if they're quarantined. I think they might be self-isolated or self-monitoring. Because right now, I mean, one of the things with this coronavirus is it's very mild for 80% of the people. So some people don't even know they have it, which is why
Yeah.
it's spread so fast into so many different countries. And it also has a long incubation period. I think it's up to
14 days.
14 days, 2 weeks, you can be contagious. So if you have a mild sniffle, you're not staying home, you're going out, you're still doing your regular routine, but you're also then spreading the virus to other people. So there is no vaccine yet. They are starting 2 clinical trials right now, one for a vaccine and one for an antiviral that will actually work against the coronavirus. So those are just starting now. So they say a vaccine takes about a year, maybe even longer, to go through the human trials and production, where they can actually ship it out and actually distribute it to local health departments and hospitals. So that takes some time. Obviously, the weather's a factor. This is the peak season for flu. Flu is actually more dangerous. Coronavirus is basically in between the common cold and the flu. Flu kills way more people every year. It's way more dangerous. We will be recommending, getting recommendations out there and some public service announcements about getting your flu shot, hand hygiene, 20 seconds, hot water and soap, not touching your eyes, nose, mouth. So basically, we're going to do non-pharmaceutical intervention campaigns. So if you're sick, stay home from work. You may see higher absenteeism in school, work, movie theaters, things like that, but social distancing, stay home from work, hand hygiene, just knowledge. So that's what we're gonna start working on now. And I do have a meeting tomorrow with the upper management here in town. So like police chief, fire chief, emergency management director, schools, things like that. We're gonna meet tomorrow morning to kind of go over a game plan and kind of get on the same page. I've been in contact with the local health directors in the area. We've been talking about doing the public service campaign and getting the message out there as to what people should expect and how to protect themselves. Surgical masks, there's different opinions on that. It doesn't filter viruses out, N95s do, surgical masks don't. Surgical mask does keep you from touching your mouth, which is one mode of transmission, so it's a little bit of a benefit, I would assume. But I don't think it's gonna protect you from drop precautions and things like that. So that's kind of mixed messaging for people right there. And I think that's pretty much it. That's what we're gonna be trying to take care of over the next week.
When I went over some of these stats, I mentioned the Spanish flu in 1918, 1920 that killed 50 million people. I also read at that time that 1/3 of the population of the world was had the Spanish flu. They just didn't die from it.
Right.
But they had it. They had it. And at that time, what was the population of the world at that time, 100 years ago? 2 billion people or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah.
So
So we'll recommend to people to get a flu shot and a pneumonia shot if you're of age. Because
But
that is
neither one of those
the-
shots will work with this coronavirus.
No.
Do they help mitigate it at all?
No.
They don't.
Not the coronavirus, but
Negative.
an effect, a negative effect of the coronavirus is respiratory, so you can get pneumonia as a side effect of the coronavirus and being.
Same thing with flu.
Correct. So you get a pneumonia shot, it will help keep that at bay if you do get sick. So,
That's
So-
why people die of the flu, is they get pneumonia.
yes.
So the coronavirus will, worst case scenario, give you respiratory problems that will kill you. Am I correct?
Worst case scenario, yes, but that's worst case scenario, which less, greater than 80% of the cases are mild.
And don't even know that they have it.
Incidentally, I also mentioned the bubonic plague. That was a bacterium. That wasn't a,
Right.
that wasn't a flu.
So, yeah, so the thing with the coronavirus and the reason why it spread and took such a good foothold is because it's mild in most of the people and they don't know they have it, and they still go about their daily routines.
Yeah, but the problem is, if you don't know you have it, then you can
In
transmit
Wuhan-
what you don't know.
And Wuhan
Transmit
City
it.
is 11 million people. New York City is only 8. So this city is huge. Giant population, a giant hub for tech, biotech, manufacturing, and travel. We get high-speed trains that leave Wuhan on a regular schedule going all over China. So.
Not now.
It was an epicenter. Well, not now, they locked down, but it was
Well, it's
a little too
interesting,
late.
I was reading this morning, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, that they're talking about relaxing the restrictions.
Right.
In certain areas of China, because the economy has come to a halt. People have to work, so they relax the restrictions, worst case scenario, people go back to work and further spread the coronavirus.
Right. So,
My question is, for the flu shot, I know we're talking about that, so if someone had the flu, for example, that hadn't got the shot, do you recommend that they get it afterwards? So
Yes.
that's the question.
Because there are multiple strains of the flu.
exactly. So,
Are you, how concerned are you with this coronavirus? The new one?
Not really much.
That is good to hear.
it is. I think
Yeah.
most of it is the news, the media, and since it's a novel, a new strain, it scares people. It's got a very, very low mortality rate, less than flu, but it's still something that people haven't been exposed to, so it does heighten some sensitivity on people, and people do panic.
All you hear in the news right now is politics and the coronavirus.
Yep.
That's it.
But I think that that's what Brian was saying too, and what I was saying was that we're taking this opportunity of having the coronavirus there to remind people to get their flu shot.
And
as
hand
part of it.
washing.
And hand washing is just like a public service announcement.
Yes, we're
Because
gonna
those are the
create
more
some.
important things.
Yes, so that's what we're looking to do starting tomorrow, is get some of this messaging out there. I'm not sure what modes we're gonna go yet, but I'm sure social media, websites, maybe something in the papers,
How
something
close are
on
you working
NACAM.
with the schools?
I'm meeting with them tomorrow. So we're definitely gonna get on the, oh, look at who it is. Welcome. Hello. All right, so yeah, so we're gonna meet with the schools tomorrow. Schools, emergency management, police, fire, management here, and how to get a plan as to what we're gonna get out there and when.
Frank, most of this meeting, we've been talking about the coronavirus, because it's, all you hear about now in the media is the coronavirus and politics. And so I started discussion, and then they all chipped in. If you have anything in particular you'd like to say about the virus. It appears that, well, like the big dip that the stock market's been taking this week, they say 80% of it is due to this fear of this coronavirus, and the other 20% is due to politics. But what's your take on, how concerned are you about and with this virus?
Well, we do have a pulmonologist on the board.
And he already expressed his, believe me, I've been looking to my right most of this meeting,
So
trust me.
I saw something recently about the case fatality rate for SARS is around 9%. For MERS, it's around 34%. That's the Middle Eastern virus. And the case fatality rate for coronavirus, I believe, is 2%, which is more than the influenza. But it's, you know, I think that obviously, so most patients who, or most people, we're going to call them patients, people who get coronavirus are going to survive it. The issue is that they're going to continue to pass it on. You're going to have a pandemic type of situation. So the right now, there's contain, there's quarantine. It seems to be more efficiently spread person to person than we thought. But that, other than that, those masks that everybody is sold out of don't protect you from it. They might protect somebody, excuse me, they might protect somebody else, you know, who you might give it to, but they don't protect you, so it doesn't really make much sense to do that. What I have seen is that hand washing is really important, so if you're gonna go on a bus or a T or something like that, you know, don't get out and touch your face. That's how you're gonna inoculate yourself with the virus. So touching your eyes, touching your nose, touching your mouth. So keep your hands away. Wearing gloves doesn't help because most people put gloves on dirty hands. So just hand washing, and I'd avoid crowded places.
Social distancing.
I'd avoid crowded places where people are wearing masks.
All right.
How concerned are you with this virus?
I'm concerned enough. I have 2 trips planned where I'm going to be in a hermetically sealed tube called an airplane for a few hours in the next 6 weeks. I'm not overly concerned,
I
but
had
I'm
an
not
ulterior motive for
unconcerned.
asking that, because I'm gonna be in a medically sealed airplane this weekend.
Yeah, so it's not like I'm not concerned, but, you know, if you were really smart, what you would do is you'd wait for the market to go a little bit lower and then kind of go all in.
With what? I've already lost some money by that time.
You know, basically get a fear dividend.
Yeah. Anything else?
On that, we're done with that. I do have one thing to pass out. This was put across my desk just the other day. It is an article, it's gonna be going to town meeting, on a plastic bag ban. The North Andover Sustainability Committee is proposing this. The Health Department would be the enforcement agency. So,
Is that the way it is in other cities and towns?
I'm looking into that now. I know
Because Haverhill
Andover,
already has it.
Haverhill already has it.
Yeah,
Okay, and I know Andover has it as well, and the health department was in charge of enforcement. So, once it's up and running, it's very easy. It's maybe a complaint here or there if somebody reverts back, but once you get the education piece done and everybody changes over to a new format for their business, then it should be pretty self-sustaining. It's the initial push, I think, is what we're
yeah,
looking at.
it's outside of the purview of health. I mean, what about banning the use of plastics has to do with, I mean, obviously, you know, you want to get rid of pollution and things like that, but, I mean, it's not really it doesn't seem like it's a health department issue.
Correct.
I'd be, from the professional side of the health department, I'd say, I don't know. We have important things to do, you know, ensuring clean water and everything else, and these plastic bags are a nuisance.
Right. So, I didn't
I think it
write
has some
this or
merit.
draft it.
Like in the wintertime, and you're just driving around, you can see the trees, no leaves, but
I didn't
they're
say
like
I was
glowing
a-
plastic bags.
I didn't say I was against it, but I'm just saying that I don't know
Yeah.
that this
No, I'm
belongs
saying,
in the
I
health
think it has
department.
some merit. Matter of fact, I was reading recently that there, certainly for PET type of plastics, they stay around for generations, if not hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But they're working right now on, under the label, an additive that would actually break down the bag once, or the bottle, once it's thrown away. Very, very interesting. It makes sense. It biodegrades it. So I'm not quite sure what this additive
What's the
is,
additive?
but,
That's the
but,
trick.
I don't know.
That's the tricky
I
question.
think there's a bacteria that they've isolated.
Oh, you heard
does-
that too,
does
huh?
eat it,
Yeah.
but the problem with, the problem is if you put it in a landfill, then it gets capped and it becomes an anaerobic system, and so it stops, you know, there's not really any digestion that occurs.
Right.
So I'm not saying that I'm against a ban, I'm not sure that putting it under the health department is the place for it.
And I just got this. I did talk to a member of the Sustainability Committee and invited them to talk about it at the next Board of Health meeting. But, so this is your background information for next month.
I guess I should have held my fire then.
No, not at all, because I literally just got this like 3 days ago. So, we will see. We can talk about it. I did talk to Andrew Shapiro about getting it up and running, and maybe the Sustainability Committee will do that. The messaging, the legwork, the footwork, and all that. And then after that, it would just be maintenance, which I think I'd be fine with. Doesn't seem like it would be a lot of work at that point.
So when we enforce something,
Yep.
because we're also an enforcement board, we enforce the health code.
Yeah.
We usually have a regulation that regulates something, so we
Yep.
don't really regulate the grocery stores, we don't regulate the convenience stores. I just don't practically how it would work.
I'm not sure.
So, I mean, if somebody violates our health code, we can say, well, you can't get your septic permit, or you can't sell cigarettes, for example. I mean, what are we gonna, what's our,
In here, there's a fine mechanism listed as part of the enforcement. So, like I said, this is brand new. It's gonna be on for town meeting. So I think they wanna get a sense and come before the board, discuss it with us.
And what do they want us to do?
Talk about it.
Okay.
So, that'll be on your agenda for next month. We can discuss it with them, the committee here, in a public hearing, or a public meeting.
Anything else? Is there a motion?
move to close the meeting?
I'll second.
Those in favor say aye.
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 Meeting closed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.